We've recently combined two of America's favorite pastimes into a display here at our studio gardens. Those two pastimes we're talking about are gardening and model railroading, more commonly known as garden railways. Now, a garden railway combines landscaping with model railroads to create basically a miniature world using a scale of a ½ inch equaling a foot, known as a G scale. Garden railways are not a new venture. It first began in Britain around the 1860s. It achieved some popularity in the United States in the 1920s and 30s, but later fizzled out during the end of World War II. A German company, Lehman Grossbahn, or LGB, is pretty much credited for the garden railway resurgence in the United States again in the late 60s, with its specifically designed rugged trains for outdoor use and more American-style introductions. We first saw a garden railway at the AmeriFlora exhibit in Ohio a couple of years ago, and the popularity of garden railroading seems to be full steam ahead with over 1,500 garden railroads in the United States and some 15 of those right here in Oklahoma. Like any garden project, there are some key points to consider, and the first step usually is site. With our particular site, we have partial shade or sun, and that gives us a little bit more flexibility in the types of plant that we put in our landscape here at our garden railway. And also with the garden railway, site would be very important as far as the drainage part of it. You wouldn't want it in a low area where it would hold water, or areas where under heavy rains it would wash anything away. We've raised ours up, of course, but we have drainage where it really will not affect the terrain at all, hopefully. And we'll have to check that out, of course, with our heavy rains. Now also, critters are going to be a big part. And with us, our Oklahoma gardening armadillos will visit us pretty frequently. And so we decided right off the bat we would go ahead and raise it up with some keystone retaining walls that were donated from the DeLisi company here in Stillwater. And they're just retaining walls that we've raised up about a foot, a little over, so the armadillos hopefully won't climb up in here and dig up any of our track or damage anything. And also the grade is very important. Usually it's suggested at a 3% grade, which really equals 3 inches of rise over 100 inches of travel. If it gets much more steeper than that, it's hard for the engine to pull the train across the landscape. Now the track and the buildings and the train are really all considered weatherproof outdoor equipment, but most people choose to keep the controls and the train and engines inside buildings or try to protect them. And we were fortunate enough to have the Tulsa Portable Building Company donate one that fits in nicely here at our studio gardens and with our garden railroad. And if you'll notice at the bottom, there's a little hole that someone has creatively figured out a way to bring the train right out of the building onto the track, and of course that is Alan Jubbs, our studio grounds manager. Now Alan has played a key role in the design and installation of our track, and Alan's going to join me here, and we're going to tell you basically how we started out on the project. Now Alan, I don't know about you, but it's exciting for me to get it to this point.
Oh, it is.
To actually be able to see it run. Now, with our track, really the first thing that we started with was some design ideas, and we had some horticulture and landscape architecture students submit 4 design ideas for us to actually give them a little bit more practical experience as well, but they just came up with some different designs, shapes, and of course we'd given them some guidelines to go by with the grade and the space and the size that we wanted and the amount of track and a few things like that, but we ended up picking one out. And then Alan and I just kind of penciled in some areas to basically create our miniature little town, which is a Western theme at the turn of the century. But then it came down to actual nuts and bolts of design, and Alan's got a book here that's an LGB track planning and technical guide, and there's a lot of references and information out there available to help you in the design and to make sure you have the correct radius and all of those types of things. But we actually ended up using a program called PC Rail that helped us in our radius to make sure we didn't get too big of curves, and usually it's anywhere from 4 to maybe 12, 15 feet, I guess.
Feet, yeah.
And also it helped us in the actual part numbers and sizes, and it was very easy to use, and there's other computer programs out there. But once we got the track layout, with the size and everything. Then the landscape architecture students, again, put it in combination with a program called AutoCAD.
Which is a computer-aided design.
And that basically helped us with a finished product so we could visualize and see what it looked like. And that was a big step for us again, because it was exciting to see what we were going to be doing, but also that meant the work was about to start.
Just about to begin, yeah.
Well, Alan, after our foundation was put in, you did a lot of work ahead of time that's underground that we don't even see. What did you do there?
Well, we've put in half-inch PVC for irrigation, and we also ran a PVC conduit for electrical lighting, 110, as well as to light the houses later. And we also ran power for our track, which our track is 12-volt DC, which most trains are either electrical or battery powered or live steam.
Right. Well, and then of course we put in the soil and got it covered up and ready to put the track down. And that's where we've heard so many different types of stories of anything from gravel to concrete. But we got an idea from a gentleman in Tulsa, who they'll get to see his garden later, about using actual curbing bars, concrete curbing bars, or tree rings. And you can see one here beside me, and they come in lengths of 2, 3, or 4 feet. And that's what we put our ballast or foundation for the track. And Alan, tell us how that was to work with.
Well, it worked out great. The 2, 3, and 4 foot lengths were just excellent for the pieces of LGB track, and for also the radius of the tree rings just worked out perfect for a radius of our track.
Now you had to break some, of course that was easy to do too, but you would think that wouldn't move, which we don't want it to, but the next step is another pointer we got from him that really helped in the placement of the track, wasn't it?
Well, placing the track onto this, it was very simple. He had designed this galvanized strip, which is a 1-inch piece of galvanized that is 10 inches long, and the critical measurement is 3 5/8 in here, which allows the track to clip to it. Then you just spring these in, and they just clip over the side of the block, and the track just clips in. This allows movement of the track, which is just like what the big railways have, is the track moves when that train rides on it. And as that train comes around, it just works slick.
Right, and that makes it easy for us to take it off and clean it or repair it or do anything, and that way it's not concreted on there like we'd heard so many stories.
And it's so easy to expand,
right.
too.
Now the other part I know is getting the pieces of track connected is real important too, and you want to show us what we do there?
Well, the first thing that you want to do is try to clean it. We found that starting fluid or even alcohol worked really well on cleaning the connectors, because this is your actual power for the train. This is a positive and negative lead. It's heavy enough that you can either solder it. People said solder it or clamp it or crimp each one of these pieces of track together. LGB just recommended to take their contact paste and dab a little bit right here at this end of the connector and some at this end of the connector.
And Alan, you tell me that paste isn't gluing, it's just
not gluing.
Again for the power through the track, basically, the electrical power.
Yeah, and all it does is it prevents corrosion in there, and it lubricates that joint where it just slides nicely together, and you wipe off any excess and you're ready to go.
Ready to go. Well, that part actually turned out to be pretty easy. I think the contact, again, once it was in, we're finding is important, because ants can leave honeydew and dirt and dust and tree limbs, so occasional cleaning, but also it's important to polish it. And what have you devised there, Alan?
Yeah, well, just the environment has some corrosion factors on it, and what we found is that we just used a polishing pad, or some people call it a scouring pad, to polish the surface of the track and remove any debris. And it just fits on the back of a pole sander for drywall. Now, if your track is really corroded and it has some major contact problems, you can put a piece of sandpaper on here. But they recommend that all you need to do is polish the track. And this works really well. You can just run right along the surface of the track and just polish that track.
And you do
really
that just about each time before we run the train, don't you?
And we haven't had any problems of electrical conductivity
whatsoever. Now let's go back and look at some of the electrical wiring here. I think part of the problem that scares people, just like with irrigation, is any kind of wiring. Tell us what you've done and show us a little bit of the wiring there.
Well, I want to share with people that it really scared me when we started out doing this. And what we have here is we have a switch which changes the direction of the train. And all it is an electrical switch that works these two pieces of rail back and forth and moves the train from either our main track or into our barn. We ran 10 wires out here, 2 to each switch. We have 5 switches, and 6 wires to 2 to each different sections of track to give it power. And the reason why we did that is so we could do some fancy things with our tracks, really easy and simple. And it took a little bit of thought, but it was real easy to do, Steve.
And then you just ran all the wires in right into the building, so you operate your control from one point. So you can change any of the switches from inside the building, start the train from inside the building.
Right inside the building.
And of course, folks, now he's having so much fun, he plays with it all the time. But we appreciate all of Alan's hard work, and really, just like so many other projects here at the garden, once we got started, it turned out to be pretty easy. But there's still plenty more, and we'd like for you to stay tuned, because we'll be talking in the next few weeks about some of the design features, like our water garden and our tunnel and bridges and other things in the buildings. We'll also talk in detail about the plant material that we're using to show you how you can keep the landscape plant material in scale. And then we'll top it off by taking you on some tours of some other garden railroads across the state. So we encourage you to be sure and stay tuned.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. You can also find more recent videos on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.